Hi, everybody. I see some familiar faces um, and some familiar names. Nice to see you all. Glad you could make it. I'm going to talk about Passive House certification. Uh, Go ahead and throw questions in the chat as we go along, and I'll try and respond to them as they come up as opposed to saving them for the end. I find that works better for me. Um, okay, now let me see if I can get the screen to go forward. There we go. Okay. That's me, Steve Mann. My company's Home Energy Services. I'm based out of Berkeley. I'm a sole practitioner. I got the passive house, was bit by the passive house bug about in 2010, and I got certified as a consultant in 2012. And then I did a FIAS Rater certification stuff for a few years, and then switched over to PHI and became a certifier in about 2018, I think 2019, something like that. So I've been doing this for a while, and it's still a lot of fun, and it's still a deep topic, and there's always something new to learn. So that's my brief bio. That's a picture of my house, which was the first PHI project that um, I didn't certify it. PHI certified it, but it was the first step on to becoming a certifier. So this is what we're going to talk about today. These are the learning objectives. They were in the registration stuff. Basically, why should you certify? I encourage all my clients to certify, but some do, some don't. It's a matter of personal preference, a variety of factors. About half of my projects, I am the certifier, and about half I am the consultant. So there's a separation there, and I'll talk about that a little bit. I'm going to talk about the various players a little bit and the relationships and how everybody works together, hopefully nicely and as a team. I'm going to talk about the timeline a little bit, but for those of you that do architecture and do construction, you know that timelines look great on a piece of paper, but reality is different. So things change, things happen. I'm going to talk about sort of like how the certifier gets involved and at what point, okay, regardless of the project timeline. And we'll see how that sort of fits together. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about documentation because that's really the heart of certification. It's pretty much a documentation submission for the most part. And I'll talk about what's required in some of those areas. I won't talk about all the nuances. There are a lot of nuances. I'll just sort of give you like a brief 30,000 foot overview. And then I'll talk about how to make it go smoothly, if possible. Just like construction, there's going to be wrinkles, there's going to be issues, stuff's going to happen. But there are things you can do to make it go more smoothly than it might otherwise. Okay. Here's the audience for architects that are doing passive house projects. The plan requirements, that's probably the most important thing. And the plan requirements are typically above and beyond what you're going to see on a normal residential project. I strictly do residential and small multifamily. Uh, Larger projects are a whole different ball of wax. I'm not going to talk about anything related to that really, except in sort of like the general picture. Uh, Audience is also for the CPHDs and Cs who are doing the modeling. And this is going to be a design PH, SketchUp, PHPP, EasyPH, anybody who's a number cruncher, who's the official project nerd. And I use the word nerd lovingly. I think of myself as a nerd. I crunch a lot of numbers, and I like talking to people that do that. So that's what nerds do. We talk about being nerdy. As for builders, I'm talking about, construction documentation requirements, commissioning requirements, things like that. And then there are typically always other team members that aren't any one of those categories, but they're involved somehow. It might be, a secondary architect that's working with the primary architect. It might be somebody on the builder's team. Who knows? There's any number of people that can get involved. Uh, and then I'm primarily talking about single family project practitioners. Okay, I've already kind of hit that. So I'm not going to worry about that anymore. I think I've said enough about that. Okay, so what is a certifier? My brief analogy is, my brief metaphor, my brief commentary about that is we're kind of like auditors. And when you hear the word auditor, you think of either accountants or the worst case, the IRS. We're kind of like them, but we're nicer and friendlier and not quite as picky. But essentially, we do the same thing. We look at a bunch of documents, we look at a bunch of stuff, and we look for clear audit trails of how you get from a design to a finished project, and how it all comes together, and how you can show me as the certifier what you built clearly and easily, and so that I can understand it and I can say, yes, you have built a passive house building. That's what we look for. In order to do that, we do have significant passive house project experience. I've been involved in, I'd say, I don't know, 30 or 40 projects, something like that. I don't really count anymore. Right now, I'm doing about 10 to 15, depending on what stage they're in. We are trained by the Passive House Institute. I think we spent 5 days in Darmstadt, Germany, several years ago. That was a lot of fun. One thing I want to stress is every certifier is different. We all have the same backgrounds to a certain extent. We all have the same objective, which is to deliver a certified project to the Passive House Institute. But we have different scopes of the types of projects we want to take on. Like I said, I'm single family residential. Some people, like let's say Stephen Winter Associates, typically just do large multifamily projects. Okay. Um, the territory that you work in varies as well. I do North America, but I'd be happy to certify any project anywhere in the world. I've actually done lead work in Japan and the Philippines. So I like doing that kind of stuff. It gives me a chance to get out of the office. But everybody's a little bit different. So when you're looking for a certifier, you should shop around and just talk to them and get an idea of who they are and how they operate. We are not site inspectors. We don't go to projects. We can if we're interested, but it's not part of the job. Okay. We're basically paper pushers and number crunchers. And as I said, we cannot do the building modeling. There's another person on the project team that is responsible for doing the building modeling. And like I said, that's going to be the PHPP is the key model, but it could also hopefully include design PH, might be easy PH. So there's a variety of ways you can model the project. We end up looking at that after it's finished by somebody else. We are a third party inspector, essentially. Benefits of certification are it is a third party review. It's good to have somebody review your project to make sure that you have aligned yourself with the Passive House um, project requirements and the metrics and all that stuff. If you get a certifier involved early on, they might be helpful in helping you avoid false starts instead of like going down a path that might steer you away from a certifiable project. Okay, we do have those kinds of conversations. In terms of professional development, we can help, especially for uh, new builders, new architects, new passive house consultants. We can help guide you to a certain extent. Like I said, we're a third party arm's length relationship, but that doesn't mean we can't assist to a certain extent. And we can sort of help everybody up their game a little bit if the team wants to do that, if it's needed in order to get the project across the finish line. We can operate in that capacity. Cost control, it's the same kind of thing. We do have a lot of experience, so we can help with value engineer types of decisions. I talk to people a lot about construction assemblies and what they might or might not want to consider doing. And sometimes they have cost ramifications. And then, as a friend of mine told me years ago, two cabbage heads are better than one. That's just another way of saying the more eyes, the better, as long as it doesn't get out of control. You want more information about the benefits? Here's a brochure from the Passive House Network. When you get the slides for this presentation, that link there should be live. So you should just be able to click on it and download this. Okay, the players. I've already mentioned it. There's a homeowner. That's usually who we contract with. Because again, we're third party arm's length relationship. There's going to be at least one designer or architect. There's going to be the nerd, okay, the PHPP creator, often called the consultant, but they don't have to be certified or trained in anything. If they know how to do it, that's fine. There's going to be a builder, there's going to be subcontractors, and then there's going to be a certifier. This is something I'm presenting this in terms of how I like to operate. Like I said, every certifier is different. The way I like to operate is to have one primary point of contact so that I'm not talking to six different people to collect what I need or to get the information I need. That doesn't mean I don't talk to everybody on the team if necessary, but I don't want six or eight people sending me documents because chances are pretty good that they're all going to send me the same stuff. Then I have to weed through it. So I like to have a manageable process. That's one thing that makes this go smoother. We get involved typically at the very beginning, briefly. Okay, we take a quick look at the project, and this is where we can do, a value-added engineering and a certain amount of guidance. We are not designers; we don't get involved as designers, but we can get involved at schematic design to assist if people want that. If you really want to get formal, we can do something called a design stage assistance letter, which basically is a formal letter saying, okay, I'm a certifier. I've looked at all your plans and what you've got. And if you build the building according to the documents I looked at, it will be a certifiable building. I generally don't do that. None of my clients want that. It's just extra time and effort. We kind of do that informally, but other other certifiers do this, and it's great if you want that kind of warm, fuzzy feeling in the beginning. So that is an option. We do limited consultation during construction, but again, we're not the consultant, we're not the designer, but we can assist within certain boundaries. The bulk of what we do comes in at the final review after the project is finished, it's built. We review all of the documentation. We might go back and forth with the project team on the details, and then we end up submitting a final package to the Passive House Institute. Now, they reserve the right to review that final package. They may or may not do that. That's in our contract, that's an option. It happens sometimes, other times you send them a submittal package and like, fine, here's your certificate. So you never know what's going to happen, but that could be part of the process. Okay. Let's talk about the big lift, the documentation requirements. There are basically six categories here. If you want to find out more of this, you want to download these two links. One is the building criteria. This is what you have to do in order to get a certified project. And then the second one, the Passipedia document, is here are example documents. These are submittal requirements. Question from Vincent. Are I more involved at the design stage for remodel, e.g. to provide pre-certification? No, not really. Most of my projects are new construction. I've got a couple of remodels that I'm doing. Um, and the amount of involvement as a certifier is about the same. Okay, it's not a big difference, really. I'm trying to think if that's a false statement, but no, I think that's a pretty accurate statement from my experience. My remodel experience is limited. I say maybe 1 in 10 projects is a remodel. Okay, I'm doing 2 interfits right now, maybe 3, maybe 4. I have to go back and look at my project list. So yes, I am doing some. Okay, documentation. That's one thing. For I'm just going to go through this. There's the documentation, there's the modeling plus auxiliary calculations, there's specifications, there's a bunch of MEP stuff, construction photos, and testing and commissioning reports. Those are the categories of the things you need to submit to a certifier. Okay, architectural plans. The site plan has to have, and again, you can get these samples that I'm showing here are from this second document here, the Passipedia document. So you don't need to study these slides. There's more information in the Passipedia document. I'd recommend you download it and read it. Okay. You have to have a true north designation. You have to show neighboring buildings. You have to show shading obstructions and an outlining of the building highlighted. Okay. For the floor plans, you need to outline the thermal envelope and the air barrier. And we typically recommend you do it in separate colors and identify them. Okay, and this is just one sample. Um, we would like to see dimensions for the thermal barrier because that's really what we measure when we're certifying a building, and that's what the consultant should be measuring. Sometimes you get that, sometimes you don't. As a certifier, you learn to deal with it. The other thing we want to see is a treated floor area that's highlighted. Now, treated floor area is an interesting little art and science all to itself. Um, you just have to figure out how to do it. I'm not going to delve into it any more than that. Okay. But we need a clear representation of what the treated floor area calculations are. We don't want to do those ourselves. The consultant or somebody needs to do that and make it clear because all of the calculations in the PHPP, or virtually all of them, rely on an accurate treated floor area number. So that's got to be right on 99 to 100% accurate. And we check that very closely. On the sections, same things. We want the thermal barrier and the air barrier outlined. We want materials listed. Now, this can come up on the sections or it can come up on the details, and I'll show you details in a minute. Okay. Again, dimensions of the thermal barrier. And we want to see materials here that match the materials in the details. If I see you identify, say, rock wool insulation on the outside in a section, but then in the details you call out plant-based material of some kind, it's clear to me that somebody's not keeping stuff up to date, and I don't know what you actually built. Okay, to me, that's a red flag that says, okay, somebody's not keeping track of stuff or taking care of business. So I'm going to look at things a lot more carefully because it's an indication of sloppy work. So I want the materials to match all the way through. Here's a sample of some details. We need to see details again with the thermal and air barriers marked, the materials called out, dimensions, especially on door and window details. We want to see reveal dimensions because they have a significant effect. They can have a significant effect on your solar radiation. And again, I've already said this, the materials and the details should match the materials in the sections. And as I'll see later on, the materials in the specifications. Mark, is this level of detail required for all projects, including Interfit? It seems like although this level of detail is required as a major barrier to scaling passive house. Good question, Mark. It actually is a bit of a barrier initially. It is required because we need to know exactly what's in the building, in all places. Uh, what I've found is once a project team, and especially a passive house consultant or an architect, if they're working together, once they've done this a few times, they develop a set of templates, a set of standard details. It's just like structural engineers. You get a set of structural plans, you get two plan sheets that are project specific, and then you get a third plan sheet that is basically boilerplate stuff that may or may not totally apply. The architects that I work with and that I like working with are the ones that know how to do this, and it doesn't present a great burden to them. But the first time you do a project, and I've done this with some architects as well, it can be a pain in the butt, but it is pretty much required. Um, sorry, that's bad news. For windows, are the details some side provided by the manufacturer? Uh, I wouldn't really do that because what that means is the manufacturer is designing your building for you in your interface, and they may have no knowledge about the thermal bridge requirements, what the building assemblies look like, all that stuff. What I do go to window manufacturers for are U-frame values and glazing specifications, that kind of stuff. But I don't really think they're in a position to provide you with installation details as shown here on the screen. If you can get them to do it, great, but they're going to have to match what's actually done. The chances of that happening are pretty limited, I'd say. Okay, the nerdy stuff. We need a PHPP. That's the core numerical crunch document. It's got to be complete. It's got to be error-free, including the plausibility check. For the passive house nerds out there that know about PHPP, there's a check worksheet that contains errors. If there's no errors there, that's great. but there's a secondary section called a plausibility check that has additional commentary that's generated automatically, and somebody has to address those comments. And it might be things like massing, questions about massing, or a large percentage of windows, or a small percentage of windows. And that needs to be addressed in order to get through certification. You need a clear, accurate treated floor area calculation, a clear volume calculation, and in many cases, a ventilation design, which in most cases for single family is actually quite easy to do. And a lot of my architects actually do that. And as I'm a consultant, I do that as a consultant. Um, I encourage architects or designers or somebody in the project team to submit this stuff in a clearly readable format. Here on the bottom is a treated floor area calculation and a volume calculation and a ventilation calculation all in one worksheet. It's clear, it's accurate, it's brilliant. It makes my life easy. I'd like to see that supported by floor plans that are color coded to match this schedule if possible. Now, this isn't a perfect world. Um, I don't always get this. I don't usually get this, but I encourage this kind of stuff. Okay. Bronwyn, it would be great if the CEC or some entity in California could sponsor the assembly of a book of passive house compliant details for California. That would be great. Maybe that's a passive house California type project, because I don't see the CEC doing that anytime soon. But that would be very nice. Let me go back here. I mentioned on this, there's auxiliary calculations, Easy PH, which is the latest version of the passive house planning package that comes out, basically has embedded in it a schedule like the one shown on the bottom here. It's a little bit different and it's a little bit tricky to get used to, but I think that's going to be the future. Instead of having separate schedules and things, people are going to be using Easy PH, and everything gets embedded in the PHPP, or virtually everything. So I think that's where the future is. Shading detail. Shading can be a real pain. Unless you're in, in the plains in Kansas with nothing surrounding you at all. Okay. Generally, I have to go and get types of shading information from the project team. Now, the site plan should have some stuff, but generally they're not that accurate, and it's not going to contain all the information you need. I need to see tree heights and the breadth of the tree envelope. Okay. And so I usually ask the project team to go out, take photos, measure the heights, put together a worksheet, and ideally put it into Design PH. Um, for my money, Design PH is the only way to do accurate shading. And I'm at the point where I pretty much will not certify a project without a Design PH model, because there's just too much extra work involved, both for the nerd who's doing the number crunching and for me as the certifier. It especially has to do with things like terrain. There's really no good way to do terrain accurately, with like a secondary spreadsheet or something like that. It just doesn't work. Um, it, this is my personal opinion. Okay. Uh, there is a BC Canada book. Yes, haven't seen it. Don't look at it. It might actually apply. To my mind, every project is different, so the details are always different. And if a project team pulls stuff from a detailed book, great. They can refer that to me and they've got the information. I've never had that experience. Every project team does things differently in my personal experience. Okay. Thermal bridge calculations. You could talk about books for thermal bridge calculations too. In theory, they are out there and you can pull from them. I've never had a project team do that either, because every project is unique as well. I encourage the team to put together a thermal bridge booklet where they identify all the thermal bridges tied back to the project details, okay, on the plan sheets. That's going to be thermal bridges plus door and window installations, plus building intersections, change of insulation layers, any place where there's a potential thermal bridge. I like to see a catalog, and then depending on the nature of the thermal bridges, I ask them to tie those to a set of thermal bridge calculations. Ideally, the best thing to do is to do a thermal bridge free design, which is possible. In fact, I've had several teams that have been able to do that. You have to go into the project and schematic design thinking, I'm going to do a thermal bridge free design, and that sort of comes out of it. Okay. Um, I'd say that's maybe a quarter of the projects that I've done. Other than that, you do need to identify thermal bridges, document them, calculate them. And this could require a third party to calculate those. There aren't a lot of people that do thermal bridge calculations and do them correctly. Okay. Um, yes, I'll let the CEC commentary alone, and I'm not gonna talk about the book. I've never looked at that book. Oh, actually, Megan, yes, I have looked at that book. I have it and I recommend it to all my clients. Uh, and it's got some generic details, but again, they don't apply to everything. It's good guidance though. Okay. Doors and windows, we need complete specifications. We need a schedule on the plans. We need a window order and or shop drawings. We need consistent identifications and sizes. When I say I'm an auditor. I'd like to see a clear audit trail from the elevations to the project door and window schedules to the shop drawings to what's in the PHPP to what's in the design PH. And I'd like to see people use the same identifiers for every one of those so that if I see something in the shop drawings, I can go and find it in the PHPP easily because it has the same name. Okay. This is not hard to do. It requires thinking about it while you're putting all this stuff together, while you're thinking about it starting with design and then all the way through project delivery. Okay. Some window manufacturers actually pull window IDs from the plans. They're my best friends because they make my life easy. Some of them don't. Okay. Uh, I'm going to look for this information, and if it's not there, somebody on the project team is going to have to provide it to me. We need glazing specifications, frame U values, PHI certifications, okay, if there are any, and SI install values if they're needed, and generally they're going to be needed. PHI is getting stricter about those. Um, NFRC numbers don't count. In California, the California Energy Commission requires you to use NFRC window and door values um, for energy code calculations. And I oftentimes have window manufacturers send those to me or project teams send those to me. And I respond saying, nope, they're irrelevant. I need more details. And then I tell them what's needed. Oftentimes, the window manufacturers do have some of this stuff. Eventually, they provide all of it, or somebody provides all of it, but it's got to be very, very complete. Let's see. Different about thermal bridge evaluation for California. Nothing. Why couldn't we use the BC numbers? You can if they match the project and if they're calculated properly. And Vincent, is there a directory of thermal bridge calculators? Um, By that, do you mean people that do that, or do you mean software that does it? If you mean software, there's really only three products that do that. Flixo is the most popular one. Therm is the second most popular one. And there's a product, people. No, there is not a directory. That's something that PHN is working on, a product of possible certifiers and consultants on like that. That would be a great thing for PHN to include in their directory, but I don't think it's part of what they're doing now. Um, I can refer you to people offline, Vincent, if you need somebody to do that. Any certifier or any experienced consultant can refer you to people too, because we've already run across this and we've had to vet people. Okay. Very detailed specifications on doors and windows. Insulation, we need to know exactly what's being installed. Um, okay, Robert. Yeah, PH Canada offers calculations. So does Passive House Institute too, if you want to go with them. I've used them on one project. They do fine work. I've never used PH Canada. Okay. For installation, we need a summary of what's installed. We need stuff called out on the details. We need specifications for each installation product with either like a certification report, like an IECC report, or legitimate, well thought out specifications that show the R values. And again, the materials in the details need to match the specifications that you provide, need to match the pictures of the installation that's delivered on site. Okay, again, we need a clean, clear audit trail from concept through to execution. Mechanical, similar kinds of depth. We need all the hardware specifications. We need PHI certifications if they exist, and they probably will for the ventilation equipment. We need a ventilation layout. We need a domestic hot water layout with pipe length calculations. If you had ducted heating and cooling systems, we need the duct layouts. And we need purchase documentation that shows that, yes, you said you were going to install this hot water heater. Here's the purchase documentation. And in the photos, we're going to want to see a picture, okay, of that same piece of equipment. Okay. Then for the builders, we need construction photos. Here's a link to an official PHI list of construction photos. Every certifier has a different way of approaching construction photos. I know this from experience. Some are more complicated, some are less complicated. I think if you use this official list, you should be in pretty good condition. Essentially, what we're looking for are photos of, the air sealing details, the insulation details with rulers showing the depth of the insulation, window installation, the mechanical installation, and shading obstructions. Now, for shading, this is going to be surrounding shading. An official requirement for the photo list is photos of the building surroundings taken from the building surfaces to the outside, so that we can just double check all the shading information that we previously saw in the modeling. Okay. Testing and commissioning reports. We need a blower door test, and it has to be done using ISO 9972 method 1. Nothing else is acceptable. And we need an official signed report that says, yes, this was done using the ISO method, and it shows the calculations and all of that stuff. For the ventilation, we need a signed ventilation report by somebody. Okay. Now, there is no such thing as a certified ventilation technician. Well, we can slice that and dice that, what I just said. But anybody who has the equipment and is qualified to do these measurements can do that. I've had passive house designers do the ventilation commissioning. I've had, California HERS raters do the blower door testing. Okay. I've had people that just have the equipment do the blower door testing. So as long as they know what they're doing and then they can, clearly show that currently that's okay. There's no qualifications, no written qualifications. And the reports have to be signed by whoever did them. Okay. All right. So this is the quick and dirty. This is everything you have to do. And like I said, there's nuances that I haven't really touched on. They come up once you dig into a project. Okay, so if you want to make this as simple as possible, here's a few recommendations. And like this is my personal take. Okay, everybody's different, every certifier is different, every project's different. This is what I like to see. One point of contact. That doesn't mean that I won't talk to the other project members, but I'd like to have one person that's generally responsible for delivering the documentation to me. It can be the designer, it can be the architect, it can be the nerd, the consultant, it could be a secondary team member. I don't care. I just don't want to have extended conversations with 5 or 6 people about the documentation. It's not an effective use of anybody's time. I would encourage you to ask the certifier how they want the data delivered. Some people like to set up drop boxes. That's my preferred method. Some people just like to have documents sent by email. I'm okay with that. Some Clients like to set up their own Dropbox and manage it on their end. I prefer to do it on my end, but I'm open to suggestions. But we need to have that conversation to make sure that whatever method we agree on, we're going to use. Okay. I'd like to see, as a certifier, I like to see everything at once as much as possible. Now, that's definitely not possible. There's always going to be odds and ends, bits and pieces. Some things get done in big chunks, sort of like architectural drawings. Send me all those at once, especially ones that are complete and accurate and finished. Okay. Um, all the modeling stuff, send me all that at once, but don't send me, a design PH and then a SketchUp and then a PHPP or an easy PH, over 4 or 5 days. I'm not going to look at them. Okay. And it's easy to get versions messed up. So, as much as possible, practically and realistically. If you have any doubts, ask your certifier. The same is true about your passive house consultant who's ever doing the modeling. If you have doubts, especially during design or project changes, ask your consultant. Oftentimes, the consultant will come to me and ask me as the certifier. Okay. When things change, same deal. Talk to your certifier. Talk to the team. If there are any questions, ask the certifier. If you think it's going to throw something off track, um, come and ask me. I'll talk to anybody about that kind of thing. And it could be any kind of change of any sort. Ideally, everybody should know the passive house requirements. The links I put in the previous slides about the certification requirements, the documentation requirements, those kinds of things. I would encourage certainly the consultant or the nerd to know that stuff. It's great if the architect knows that stuff. The builder and the subs, maybe not so much, but the more educated all the team members are, the better. Okay, it works to everybody's benefit. In terms of documents, keep everything up to date. Everything, everything, everything. Please, please, please. Don't send me a set of architectural drawings that were done 9 months ago and then a design PH that was done 2 months ago and they don't match. If they don't match, I'm going to just send them back to you and say, these don't match, fix it. Okay. So it's much easier for everybody if you make sure everything's up to date and in sync ahead of time. I already mentioned I'm going to need to see an error-free PHPP or easy PH, and the check worksheet and the plausibility check comments have to be addressed. Okay. All the documentation for the certification guide, which I just blasted through quickly. Okay. And I'm certainly happy to talk about those requirements. Your consultant should be familiar with those as well. This is one of the biggest ones, consistency across everything. I'd like to see a clear audit trail for everything. Treated floor area, clear audit trail, clear documentation. So I don't have to dig around and say, okay, well, how did you calculate that? You show me how you calculate it. I talked about window IDs all the way through everything. I'd like them to be the same. That really makes my life so much easier. Naming conventions, same deal. If you call something rock wall in your details, it's great if you don't call it mineral wall in your PHP, but call it rock wall. Okay, be specific. Specifications, clear audit trail from design to details to PHPP to photo documentation to specifications. I look for clear trails on everything, and the clearer they are, the better it is for everybody. I won't bug you. You're not going to be bugging me. Everybody's happier. Conciseness is a wonderful thing. Don't send me 5 copies of the same document with maybe 5 slight variations. Send me one document that's accurate. Okay. Redundancy is just a pain in the ass, if nothing else, for documentation management. It just doesn't work. Okay. Clarity, no mystery. I have a couple of projects I've worked on where I get secondary Excel worksheets for, let's say, shading analysis or some other kind of analysis, various things, treated floor analysis. And they're not necessarily clear, and they may or may not be linked into the passive house planning package model, which is not a good idea. So I get all this stuff, and sometimes these documents are just there and they're submitted to me, and I have no idea what they are. If you're going to do that, please make them clear. Please explain why they're there, what their purpose is, and what they're contributing to the overall certification process. Okay. Clarity is a wonderful thing, and I would encourage you to be as clear as possible. Well organized, well labeled photos. I'll talk about that in a minute. Uh, it's great if the builder takes the photos that are recommended and then organizes them by category as per the certification platform, which I'll show you on the next slide. It has categories. And if they put the photos in folders that are numbered and labeled like the categories, and then if they actually label the photos, where one photo says, okay, view from building from the north exposure, for instance, or something like that. So I know exactly what I'm looking at, and I don't have to dig into all these photos and sort of, what the hell is this? Where is it coming from? What am I supposed to do with this? It's great if the builder or somebody can help simplify that for me. That would be really nice. Okay, and in terms of all the documentation as it gets sent to me, it's great if it mimics the certification platform, if we're using that, which I prefer to use. Certification platform is an online thing that Passive House Institute does, and it has 10 categories of documentation requirements. This gets set up by the certifier if the certifier wants to use this or the project team wants to use this. It doesn't, you don't have to use this, but it's a great organizing tool. And I didn't used to use this so much, but I'm finding the more certifications I do, the more I use this for an organizing principle. I can set it up. I can upload documents to it. The consultant can upload documents to it. We have to negotiate who's going to do that. I prefer to do that, but the consultant can, the official consultant. I can actually assign multiple people that can put stuff in here, but I'm not going to do that. I want one point of contact. Okay. Uh, and this provides, you can't really see this, but if you, this is like a tree structure. And as you go down into the tree and the details, it calls out individual documentation requirements, and it'll have descriptions of things. Like we'll say, okay, well, here for the passive house planning package, this is the stuff we're looking for. Or for the window specifications, this is the stuff we're looking for. Okay. It's a great organizing principle. And I'll come back to your comment in a minute, Tad, since it's so long. I'm sure it's excellent. Okay. So this is the platform. It's a great thing to use. It's not critical or required, but I recommend it. Finally, okay, here's a quick and dirty summary. Use the platform as a guide to submittals if you're inclined to do so. When in doubt, ask your certifier. You can ask him anything you want. Uh, for the nerd on the team, I would say use Design PH, use ECPH if it's appropriate. It's not appropriate for all projects, but I would encourage you to definitely use Design PH. For the architect, I would say refer to the certification guide for the plan requirements, especially if it's your first project, because you're going to find you're going to be going above and beyond what you're normally doing. Provide clear and adequate details. This will probably be the biggest pain for your first passive house project, but it's necessary. And for the builder, complete well-organized photos and appropriate commissioning reports. Okay, so that's like my personal point of view on how to make a certification go as easy as possible. Um, Certification is an extra layer of complication on top of just designing and building a project, but there are benefits, as I pointed out early on. It's great to have extra people looking at the project. It's great to know that the homeowner actually is certified getting what they paid for. And if you don't certify the project, it's all just arm waving and assurances and things like that. So certification is a great thing. I recommend it to all my clients, and about half of them do it. And I don't do a hard sell on it. It's a choice. So there's it. Thank you very much. Let's look at questions and comments. Okay, let's see. I think I got to most of them, but let me back up a little bit. There's the thermal bridge stuff. There's thermal bridge stuff. Uh, uh, yeah. Going back to thermal bridge, California versus California doesn't require thermal bridge calculations to begin with, so it's kind of a moot question. When you look at whole assemblies, there are some minor differences in film coefficients, but they're insignificant pretty much. Um, they are intrinsic to it. When I look at the calculations in the California assemblies, I see framing factors. That's about all I see in terms of thermal bridges. Passive house is really different and it's more detailed. So I really think we're talking about apples and oranges when you're talking about California and passive house. California is dumbed down and does not do adequate thermal bridge calculations. And digging into it in more detail, I think, is like an exercise in futility. Okay, I'm sorry, TAD. PHI offers a nice comprehensive catalog of thermal bridge psi values for wood structures as well as Excel for computing variations on them. It is in German. That's why I don't mention it. Maybe it is easy to understand. Tad, if you could provide a link to that, some people might want to pick up on that and take advantage of that. It is free. I've found that anything coming out of Germany typically focuses on German construction methods and European materials. And I've never found that stuff all that useful. So I haven't really spent a lot of time looking at those things. Emma Walsh's, that's a good link there. Okay. All wood assemblies, computed side values. I think I might take a look at that. I've looked at her book, I've read it. That's a good book. Um, let's see, Marianne. Love the straight talk. Well, thank you, Marianne. I hope it's not, I hope I didn't offend anyone. I try not to do that, but sometimes it just comes out. Oh, Sarah Lewis, that's the book I've read, yes. Forthcoming third edition. If it's forthcoming, is it available or not available, Tad? If you could clarify that, that would be great. Bronwyn, certification has been an excellent tool for keeping my projects all very real, especially helpful to keep contractors honest. That's my personal experience as well. And kudos to you, Brown. One of the projects I've done with you between the two of us was we've helped keep everybody pretty well aligned. And it seems to work out okay. Megan, thank you. Megan, thank you. PHI Wood Tool Thermal Bridge Excel is also in English. I know you've used that, Rob, and I've looked at that briefly. I'll be looking at that more. Okay, here's some more thermal bridge and detail recommendations. Links, please. Put links in. Oh, Christian, here you go. Uh, that's a good task for you, Christian, in your spare time. German fluent folks give us a session taking us quickly through PHI's wood thermal bridge resource and Excel calculation tool. Great idea. And Bronwyn, there's a link, yes. Kristen, you're welcome. I know you're working on a project, so good luck with that.